What is up, guys? I've seen a little bit of confusion around Nick Fury and how his kit works, so I thought I'd make a short video just kind of explaining how Nick Fury plays. So Nick Fury is a very unique hero here because he has a permanent form upgrade here. So it's a assault side right here, and then he has the stealth side right here. And basically, whenever you're playing Nick Fury with his setup here in Alter Ego, you put your suit form upgrade into play, the assault side face up, and then as an action, you can change to your stealth suit form. So with Nick Fury here in his stealth suit form, it's really interesting because it's a force interrupt in hero form. When an enemy would attack you, it schemes instead, and you place one threat from the activation here instead of on the main scheme if there is 5 or less threats on this card. So that's really interesting because usually whenever a villain activates, and you're in Alter Ego, the villain will scheme. But Nick Fury is unique because he can be in hero form, and as long as he's in the stealth suit form while being in hero form, then whenever the villain activates, instead of attacking Nick Fury, they'll actually scheme instead, and this will apply for any single enemy, including minions as well. So, for example, let's say we have the Black Widow villain right here. So normally, if Nick Fury is in hero form and then its activation phase, Black Widow will attack Nick Fury with her base attack stat of 1. But now she will scheme instead, so she will still get a boost card. We don't necessarily know exactly what the boost card will be, and then we can flip it and 0 boost icon, so she would scheme for 2 instead, and then she would basically just place 2 threats on the main scheme. But because of the stealth suit form upgrade being in play and there's no threat on here, we place one of that threat from the activation instead of on the main scheme on this card. So Black Widow instead of scheming for just 2, she only schemes for 1, and then one of that threat will actually go on the stealth suit form upgrade. And Nick Fury, he wants to build up a bunch of threat on his suit form upgrade so he can do tons of damage, because on his assault form side, as an interrupt, whenever you attack, remove up to 3 threat from here, and this attack deals 1 additional damage for each threat removed. So if you have 2 threat on this card, and let's say Nick Fury attacks, like he's swinging with his attack stat of 2, then you can take 2 threat off here, and he's going to be swinging with 4 instead. And it's up to 3, so if you have, 5 on this card, each time Nick Fury attacks, you can take up to 3 off, so he'll do +3 to that attack. This also applies for attack events as well, so it doesn't necessarily just have to be for his basic activations over here. So as long as Nick Fury is attacking by playing either an attack event or by playing or by using his basic activations, he can trigger that, right? So if he plays like the concentrated fire here as attack event, he'll actually attack, do 4 damage to the enemy, so you can interrupt, remove 2 threat off of here, and then do 6 damage instead of just 4 if you choose to do so. Nick Fury has a very powerful response in hero form called Gather Intel. After Nick Fury makes a basic threat, place 1 threat on your suit form upgrade. So this is regardless of whether you're in your stealth suit form or the assault suit form. This is the most reliable and consistent way for Nick Fury to add threat to suit form upgrade. So if he exhausts and throws for 2, he can put 1 threat on the suit form upgrade, whether he's in stealth suit form or the assault suit form. So if you can get a bunch of readies with Nick Fury, he can ready back up and throw again for 2 and put another threat here. So the interesting with Nick, and the thing that kind of makes him a little bit difficult to manage, is that as a force interrupt on his hero side here, it's called break cover. Whenever you attack, you have to change to a sawtooth form. So let's say you're engaged with some minions right here, and let's say you're in your stealth suit form, so you're able to gather threat and put some threat on here. But if you want to defeat these minions, well, you can always have allies help you out and take them out. So let's say Nick Fury is engaged with these minions here, and he wants to attack the aim commando. Well, he can basic attack for 2, but since it's a force interrupt, before the attack goes through, you automatically flip over to a sawtooth form, and you can trigger the interrupt here on the sawtooth form right here because it's the same time window for when Nick Fury is attacking. So when you attack, remove up to 3 threat from here, so we can remove 1, and then that attack deals 1 additional damage for each threat removed. So he's going to be doing 2 + 1, 3 damage, and take out the aim commando in one go. So Nick Fury has a lot of good damaging cards and a lot of ways to control minions because of his attack events here. And then spray fire is also an attack event. So any event that has that attack keyword right here can proc with the interrupt here on the sawtooth form every single time Nick Fury attacks, right? If it doesn't have that attack keyword, then you won't be able to add additional damage to it by removing threat from this card. So you got to make sure that it has that attack keyword, but all of Nick Fury's attack events do have that. Unfortunately, because of that, if Nick Fury is swarming with some minions here, and he really wants to defeat those minions, well, he can't stay in his stealth suit form. He'll have to attack them and flip over to stealth suit form unless you have another way to defeat the minion, with an ally or something like that. But if you want Nick Fury to actually be the one to defeat the minions and clear the board, then he'll have to flip over to a stealth suit form. But because of the stealthy form's effect, is actually really cool because if the minions, and a lot of minions, I would say most minions in Marvel Champions only have a scheme stat of 1. So whenever an enemy would attack you, so during the activation phase, if a Nick Fury is in hero form and has a stealth side face up, when this minion would attack Nick, it schemes instead and does not get a boost card because it doesn't have villainous. So instead of scheming for 1 in the main scheme, because there's 5 or lesser on this card, that threat will get taken and get put on the stealth suit form upgrade. So if Nick is in the stealth suit form and he has 5 or less threat on this card, it doesn't matter how many minions he has, as long as he stays in hero form and he stays in the stealth suit form, all that threat will keep on going on the stealth suit form. And Nick has a bunch of ways to, use that threat, right? He actually wants to use that threat because, for example, one of the strongest cards in his kit is his flying car. You exhaust it and remove 1 threat from your suit form upgrade to ready up Nick Fury, and he gains the area trait into the end of the round. So getting that ready is always very powerful. But to trigger this, you have to exhaust and take a threat off of your stealth suit form upgrade. So here's a bunch of cards like his Fury's Watch. You can exhaust and remove up to 2 threat to generate mental resources. This card right here, his Intelligence Analysis, you can remove a threat from here in order to cancel the effects of a treachery, and then you have to discard this card, and you can get rid of that treachery as well. So a lot of Nick Fury's cards use the threat on a suit form upgrade as a resource and as a cost to be able to proc them and get their powerful effects. So the way to play Nick Fury to get the most value out of him is to actually keep the stealth suit form upgrade to have around like 3 to 5 threat, right? If there's 5 or less, right? So if there is 5 threat on here in the minion schemes, that threat will go on the stealth suit form upgrade. But if you have more than 5 threats, so let's say you have 6 threat on here and this minion is scheming, that 1 threat actually go on the main scheme. And that will be tough because you have to mitigate that threat or, remove it by actually having Nick Fury needing to thwart or having the ally sword to clear it off. One of the best ways for Nick Fury to steal threat is with the eye patch camera here. It's a 2-cost upgrade. When any amount of threat will be placed on the main scheme, you discard this card and you place up to 3 of that threat on your suit form upgrade instead. So this is a really cool card, and I like comboing this with his force entry right here because it can take 4 threat, that will be going on the main scheme instead and putting it on here. So let's say you have, the Black Widow villain right here, and then let's say she's scheming right here. So let me grab a 2 booster. And then with her boost card, she reviews a boost of 2. So she's going to be placing 4 threat here, right? And let's say you have 5 threat on your suit form upgrade already. So she schemes for a total of 4. Well, this right here is a force interrupt, so it's going to have priority over the eye patch camera. So when an enemy would attack you, scheme instead, place 1 of that threat from the activation here instead of on the main scheme if there is 5 less threat on this card. So you trigger that first. So from this 4 threat here, you take 1 of it and you put it on a stealth suit form upgrade instead. Then after that, you can trigger the hero interrupt here because you are in hero form with Nick Fury. And then you can place up to 3 of that threat on your super form upgrade instead. So you take this remaining 3 threat here and go on there. Because whenever you're reading this card first, there is 5 or less threat on this card. Because when the threat is initially placed, you first read this because it's a forced interrupt having priority over the regular interrupt. And there is 5 or less threat on this card, so you get 1 of it first. And you get the remaining 3 here from discarding the eye patch camera. So then you can build this all the way up to 9 threat here, which is really powerful because then whenever Nick Fury starts to do a lot of damage, you can, as a force interrupt with break cover, flip over to the Satsu form and then remove, up to 3 for each attack instance, right? So if Nick Fury has his flying car here, he can swing for 2 plus 3, so it's 5 damage, exhaust a flying car, remove a threat to ready back up, and swing for 2 plus 3 again, so you can remove 3 from here. This goes down to 2, and he'll do another 5 damage quite easily. So Nick Fury has a lot of potential to do a lot of damage, at one go. But whenever you're playing Nick Fury, I would be cautious of having too much threat on your super upgrade. Let's say you want to build for a big burst turn and you get I don't know, 15 threat on here, which I've done in my Venom Goblin game, because when you're facing Venom Goblin, you want to have big burst damage to defeat him, right on the flip, or else he'll do you, 3 phase 9 counter cards, which could be really rough, right? So let's say you're trying to build a lot of damage and you're in your stealth suit form, trying to not have the villain attack you, but then you're gathering all this threat on here. Well, not only do you get diminishing value whenever this goes over 5 threat, because you can't grab it from minions, scheming, and even with the villain scheme, you can't grab extra threat and put it on here. But one thing to note is that even though you can't use, this part where you place 1 threat from the activation on here and mitigate the threat, you can still always use your basic activation to thwart. Anytime you do that, you will, overload this card by placing more threat on it. You can still use, the eye patch camera to grab threat and put it on a stealth suit form upgrade, even if there's way more than a 5 threat on here. But the big thing to note with this card, if you get a bunch of threat on here, is if you get your obligation, which is pretty rough for Nick Fury. So it's got discovered. Whenever you change Nick Fury to the Sawtooth form, so this will automatically flip over to the Sawtooth form. Then, if there is no threat on your suit form upgrade, this card gains surge. Well, if you're trying to build a bunch of threat, then there is a lot of threat. So otherwise, choose to either take 1 damage for each threat on your suit form upgrade, or remove each threat from your suit form upgrade. In either case, this card is card. So this card doesn't get removed from the game; it gets discarded. And you either have to lose all threat here, or you can keep it, but then you're taking, like 15, 16 damage, which would usually kill Nick Fury. And unfortunately, he doesn't have anything in his kit to really counteract that, right? He does have his EMS shield here, but it's only whenever you would take damage from an attack that you can discard this and prevent all the damage. So this is not damage from an attack, so you pretty much die if you get the discovery card and you don't pick the option to just remove all threat. And if you remove all threat, it kind of sets you back to 0 if you're trying to build threats on your suit form upgrade. So that's one thing to watch out for. Nick Fury's highest burst potential. He can do it, but if he gets unlucky and gets the obligation, then it'll probably put a wrench in those plans. If you do have a bunch of minions with Nick Fury that you really want to take out and you don't want to just leave them in play any longer, then what I usually do with Nick Fury is place them like a spray fire. So, as a force interrupt when you break cover, because you're playing an attack event, you change to a Sawtooth form. You trigger the interrupt here. When you attack, remove up to 3 threat from here. So let's take all 3 off, and you get +3 to the damage here. So 6 damage to the villain and each minion engaged with you. This will wipe the board of all the minions, right? And then, before your turn ends, play a Covert Surveillance. So it's a 1-cost event. Nick Fury has 3 copies of this card in his kit. Here, action remove 2 threat from a scheme. Then, if you're in Stealth Suit form, you can put it on your suit form upgrade. Otherwise, you may change Stealth Suit form. So this way, Nick Fury can change back to Stealth Suit form. And then he can end the turn in Stealth Suit form so that when the villain would attack him, the villain will scheme instead. But this is only if you need to be in Stealth Suit form. If you have allies to block for it, or if you can block with Nick Fury himself, then it's fine, end the turn in the Assault Suit form here. Another thing to note is that if the villain pulls in a counter card like an advance, which just says villain schemes, you will not be able to steal threat from that on your Stealth Suit form upgrade, because this says when an enemy would attack you, it schemes instead, and then place 1 of that threat from the activation here instead of on the main scheme. So if the villain is just straight up scheming right away and is not attacking you at all, that scheme will just fully go, or all that threat from that scheme, will just fully go on the main scheme, and you won't be able to steal 1 of that threat and put it on your suit form upgrade because they never attacked you to initiate the beginning part of this force interrupt in hero form. Also, if you're an alter ego in the villain schemes, you will not be able to trigger this force interrupt because it's only in hero form, because this force interrupt only works in hero form because it says hero right there on the card. There's definitely a very delicate balance whenever you're playing Nick Fury. You want to be in Stealth Suit form if you need help gathering threat and putting it on your suit form upgrade. And you gotta make sure that you're in hero form whenever you're doing that. If you already have a bunch of threat here and you want to attack, then you want to use your break cover to do tons of damage, because then that will flip you over to a Stealth Suit form, and then you can do damage to minions and to the villain. But if you have more than 5 threat on here, then you're getting less value from suit form upgrade, even though there are still plenty of ways for Nick Fury to add threat on here with his basic threat activation, and with cards like Concentrated Fire, where there's an option here. If this attack defeats that enemy, you can choose either place threat on your suit form upgrade equal to that enemy's printed scheme, or you change your Stealth Suit form. So when you're playing this card, you're always going to be in your assault side because of your force interrupt in hero form, right? So whenever you play this attack event, before the attack event resolves, you automatically have to be in the Assault Suit form. So you be in this form, and you can choose either place threat on here equal to that enemy's printed scheme. So let's say you're able to defeat this minion right here because you use the interrupt here to remove a threat. So you do 5 damage with this card instead. So when you defeat that minion, you can, if you want, place 1 threat on your Super upgrade because the minion has 1 scheme right here, or you can choose to instead flip over to your Stealth Suit form to end your turn in Stealth Suit form. It's very important when you're playing Nick Fury. You don't always want to end the turn in Stealth Suit form, because if the villain schemes and there's not a lot of threat threshold on the main scheme, and that actually make you lose the game, you want to end your turn in the Stealth Suit form, and you want to allow the villain to actually attack you because you can block with the minion or something like that. But if you don't have any way to block out attacks, like if an attack would defeat Nick Fury, you definitely want to end the turn in Stealth Suit form so that you can try to mitigate some of that threat and not take the damage instead. In the situation where you're playing at a higher player count, so let's say you're playing, with a Captain America hero right here, and Black Widow attacks Captain America, so she will deal herself a boost card. So before we review the boost, Captain America has to choose if he wants to defend, or if he can ask Nick Fury to defend for him. So let's say Nick Fury chooses to defend his attack, so he exhausts here to defend. Well, the force interrupt here, when enemy would attack you, Black Widow will never attack Nick Fury, she would attack Captain America. So if Nick Fury chooses to defend, the attack still goes on him, but Black Widow never initiate the attack on Nick Fury, so it will not trigger this force interrupt right here. So even though Nick Fury is actually in a Stealth Suit form, he jumped in the way for Captain America, and the attack will actually go on Nick Fury. So the boost here is 2. There's going to be 1 plus 2, so 3 damage, and Nick Fury will actually take that as damage, and Black Widow will not be scheming because the substitute form will never happen there. So there are situations where Nick Fury can be in the substitute form and still take damage from a villain attack. Nick Fury is definitely one of the more complex heroes in Marvel Champions to play, and there's a very delicate balance in how he wants to play. So being in substitute form upgrade is good because you can mitigate a lot of threats, and you want to be in this form if you want to gather threat, because it's more easy to gather threat on a super form upgrade if you're in the substitute form, because that force interrupt where you can gather threat if there's 5 or less threat on this card. But if there's more than 6 here, then you won't be able to trigger that. So you want to kind of keep this low. Also, because if you get the obligation, then it could be game ending if there's a bunch that aren't here, or it could really ruin your plans by losing a lot of threats, on this card. Nick Fury's damage output is very good because of his interrupt here on the substitute form upgrade. So you want to kind of balance how long you want to keep the minions in play and when you want to defeat them, because Nick can definitely defeat them quite easily, but it will force him to flip and be exposed to enemy attacks here. But if he does do that, he can always play a pretty cheap, Thor event in the covert surveillance, where you can remove 2 from a scheme and then flip back over the substitute form to end your turn over there. I hope this video was informative and helpful, and let me know what you guys think. Do you guys like videos like this? And let me know down in the comments if you want to see this with other heroes. Yeah, I hope you guys all enjoy this one, and I'll see you guys all in the next video.